Hi folks, Training Tip Thursday, and I thought I would stay on the Dave Walters track. If you listen to the last video, I talked about Dave Walters. He is the #1 in his age group, 60 to 64 marathoner. I think he just did Boston on that hot day in 2:45 or so, and he was talking to the Fox River Trail Runners at our annual banquet, giving us a lot of tips. So last week he talked about the importance of getting high. His next tip was you got to go deep. So what does go deep means? It means as much as you're still always going to do a lot of easy running, you can't do all easy running. You have to do some harder and faster running. So why do you need to do that? There's a variety of reasons. This is not every single reason, but it improves your running economy. What's running economy? Think of fuel economy. You want a car with the best fuel economy. You want a body with the best running economy. So it improves your running economy. If I could read my stuff upside down, it builds stamina for most races. You know, the marathon, even though you're not necessarily going at a hard pace, you're going for a long time. In the shorter races, it's a shorter time, obviously, but you're going harder. You build stamina. It helps improve your ability to clear lactic acid from your system. I think most people have heard about that. Wish I could read. Mental preparation. I don't know how I could miss that one. When you're running harder, it helps you in your race, because when you get to the race, you remember those hard workouts, and it helps you draw back on those and be able to push through. Leg speed, especially in the shorter races, getting your legs to turn over faster. So there's a lot of benefits to doing some harder and faster running. So then, of course, the question might come up, say, well, if I should be going deep, if I should be having this harder, faster running, maybe I should be doing that all the time and doing more of that. Nope, don't want to do that all the time. So why don't we do that all the time? Again, not every reason. Injury risk. The faster you run, the higher your risk for injury. Sprinters are injured more often than other runners because they're going so fast. So we don't want to get your increased risk of injury. Recovery time, I put the asterisk by it. That's a really big thing, is recovery time. So recovery doesn't just happen the day after a run. Recovery happens several days after runs. We weave all those things together, but if you're just out running hard all the time, you're never going to recover. And an important thing to remember is running doesn't help you improve. Recovery from running is what helps you improve. So no recovery, you really don't get the improvement. And then finally, because aerobic rules. So in a marathon, 98% of a marathon is your aerobic system. Even in a 5K, 84% of the aerobic system is what's being used. So the aerobic system is still far and away the most important. I'll give you one last analogy, then we'll talk about what this mix might look like in your training, although you don't really need to worry about that because I put the mix into your training. You might not be able to read this. It's a typical cake recipe. You know, in this case, they've got 1.5 cups of flour, a cup of sugar, a teaspoon of salt, and they got a 1/2 cup of milk in there. But let's say you said, you know what, I really like milk and I really want to increase my calcium, so I'm going to change this recipe. Instead of a 1/2 cup of milk, I'm going to put in 1.5 cups of milk. Well, I think you would realize that if you put 1.5 cups of milk in, 3 times as much milk as you're supposed to, that cake isn't going to be very good. In fact, the cake is probably going to be more like soup and you're going to drink it. It's the same type of thing with your training. We want to have the right mix of all the different types of workouts, or you're not going to like what it looks like in the end. So what does that look like? Here's the pyramid. I think you've seen this before. The bottom is your base. It's aerobic. So aerobic running is typically going to be about 80 to 85% of all your miles. And I wrote in there, that's your paragraph pace. You should be able to hold a conversation when you're in that. It's the bulk of the running. One thing I should note, please don't look at your plan for any given week and do the percentages and say, hey, this doesn't work. I'm doing 86% this week or whatever. During the course of your training, during the course of the week, these numbers are guidelines. There's any number of reasons why they're going to be different from time to time. But as a general rule of thumb, the aerobic, the paragraph pace is going to be 80 to 85% of all your miles. You should be able to talk in sentences when you're in your anaerobic zone, and that's when you start to go deep. That's going to be about 10 to 15% of your miles. So 10 to 15%, you ought to be able to talk in a sentence or two and no more. If it's harder than that, the effort's too hard. Less than that, it's not hard enough. And then finally, anywhere between 0 and 5% is going to be you can spit out words. That's in your VO2 max. And that's, of course, also going deep. So you can see the total amount of time that you're going to spend going deep is maybe 15 to 20% of your miles. What does that look like? If you're running a 30-mile week, then that means that you're going to be doing 24 to 25 miles are probably going to be the easy miles. Your anaerobic, where you should be able to talk in sentences, is only going to be about 3 to 5 total miles. And then when you can talk in only words, it's only a couple miles a week. So it's actually very little. So going deep is really important. As I said, I'm already putting what I believe is the right mix into your plans. Of course, your job is to execute. If we're looking for anaerobic work, you've got to be able to push to get to that point where I'm talking in sentence, or if it's the VO2 max work, typically a lot of repeats, being able to talk in words. It's not a lot of miles, but it's very critical for building your stamina and all those other reasons I mentioned.